with spiritual, mental, and physical freedom. In the rest of the book, Hill discusses these 7 principles to attain spiritual, mental, and physical freedom. 1. Definiteness of purpose. 2. Mastery over self. 3. Learning from adversity. 4. Controlling environmental influence associations. 5. Time giving permanency to positive, rather than negative thought habits and developing wisdom. 6. Harmony acting with definiteness of purpose to become the dominating influence in your own mental, spiritual, and physical environment. 7. Caution thinking through your plan before you act. Do not be sparing in your description of these principles. I want a complete illustration of how the principles may be used by anyone who chooses to use them. Tell us all you know about the principle of definiteness of purpose. The interrogator gains some momentum here and goes for the jugular. Do we have the courage, at moments of opportunity, to act as aggressively and with definiteness of purpose? A. If you go through with this mad idea of publishing my confession, you will open the gates of hell and turn loose all the precious souls I have collected back down through the ages. You will deprive me of souls yet unborn. You will release from my bondage millions now living. Stop, I beg of you. Q. Open up. Let's hear what you have to say about the principle of definiteness of purpose. A. You are pouring water on the fires of hell, but the responsibility is yours, not mine. I may as well tell you that any human being who can be definite in his aims and plans can make life hand over whatever is wanted. Q. That is a broad claim, Your Majesty. Do you wish to tone it down a bit? A. Tone it down. No, I wish to tone it up. When you hear what I now have to say, you will understand why the principle of definiteness is so important. My opposition uses a clever little trick to cheat me of my control over people. The opposition knows that definiteness of purpose closes the door of one's mind so tightly against me that I cannot break through unless I can induce one to form the habit of drifting. Q. Why doesn't your opposition give your secret to all people by telling them to avoid you through definiteness of purpose? You have already admitted that 2 out of every 100 people belong to your opposition. A. Because I am more clever than my opposition. I draw people away from definiteness with my promises. You see, I control more people than my opposition because I am a better salesman and a better showman. I attract people by feeding them liberally of the thought habits in which they like to indulge. Q. Is definiteness of purpose something with which one must be born or may it be acquired? A. Everyone, as I have told you before, is born with the privilege of being definite, but 98 out of every 100 people lose this privilege by sleeping on it. The privilege of definiteness can be maintained only by adopting it as a policy by which one is guided in all the affairs of life. Q. Oh, I see. One takes advantage of the principle of definiteness just as one may build a strong physical body through constant, systematic use. Is that it? A. You have stated the truth clearly and accurately. Q. Now I think we are getting somewhere, Your Majesty. We have at long last found the starting point from which all who become self-determining in life must take off. We have discovered, from your astounding confession, that your greatest asset is man's lack of caution, which enables you to lead him into the jungle of indefiniteness through simple bribes. We have learned, beyond the question of doubt, that anyone who adopts definiteness of purpose as a policy and uses it in all of his daily experiences cannot be induced to form the habit of drifting. Without the aid of the drifting habit, you are powerless to attract people through promises. Is this correct? A. I couldn't have stated the truth more clearly myself. Q. Go ahead, Now, and describe how people neglect their privilege of being free and self-determining through indefiniteness and drifting. A. I have already made brief reference to this principle, but I will now go into more minute details as to how the principle works. I shall have to begin at the time of birth. When a child is born, it brings with it nothing but a physical body representing the evolutionary results of millions of years of ancestry. Its mind is a total blank. When the child reaches the age of consciousness and begins to recognize the objects of its surroundings, it begins, also, to imitate others. This imitation becomes a fixed habit. Naturally, the child imitates, first of all, its parents. Then it begins to imitate its other relatives and daily associates, including its religious instructors and schoolteachers. The imitation extends not merely to physical expression, but also to thought expression. If a child's parents fear me and express that fear within range of the child's hearing, the child picks up the fear through the habit of imitation and stores it away as a part of its subconscious stock of beliefs. If the child's religious instructor expresses any form of fear of me, and they all do, in one form or another, that fear is added to the similar fear passed to the child by its parents, and the two forms of negative limitation are stored away in the subconscious mind to be drawn upon and used by me later in life. In a similar way, the child learns, by imitation, to limit its power of thought by filling its mind with envy, hatred, greed, lust, revenge, and all the other negative impulses of thought which destroy all possibility of definiteness. Meanwhile, I move in and induce the child to drift until I bind its mind through hypnotic rhythm. Q. Am I to understand from your remarks that you have to gain control of people while they are very young or lose your opportunity at them altogether? A. I prefer to claim them before they come into possession of their own minds. Once any person learns the power of his own thoughts, he becomes positive and difficult to subdue. As a matter of fact, I cannot control any human being who discovers and uses the principle of definiteness.
Q. Is the habit of definiteness a permanent protection against your control? A. No, not by any means. Definiteness closes the door of one's mind to me only as long as that person follows the principle as a matter of policy. Once any person hesitates, procrastinates, or becomes indefinite about anything, he is just one step removed from my control. Says the devil, once any person hesitates, procrastinates, or becomes indefinite about anything, he is just one step removed from my control. The metaphysical and spiritual aspects of the author's philosophy are on display in these responses by the devil. What he calls definiteness is today often called intention, or being, goal-driven, or purpose-driven. Q. What has definiteness to do with one's material circumstances? I want to know if one may acquire power through definiteness of purpose without inviting destruction through the law of compensation. A. Your question limits my illustrations because there are so few people in the world who understand, and there have been so few in the past who understood, how to use definiteness of purpose without attracting to themselves the negative application of the law of compensation. Here you are forcing me to disclose one of my most prized tricks. I am bound to tell you that I eventually reclaim for my cause all who escape me temporarily through definiteness of purpose. The reclamation is made by filling the mind with greed for power and the love of egotistical expression, until the individual falls into the habit of violating the rights of others. Then I step in with the law of compensation and reclaim my victim. Q. So I see from your admission that definiteness of purpose may be dangerous in proportion to its possibility as a power. Is that true? A. Yes, and what is more important, every principle of good carries with it the seed of an equivalent danger. Q. That is hard to believe. What danger, for example, can there be in the habit of love of truth? A. The danger lies in the word, habit. All habits, save only that of the love of definiteness of purpose, may lead to the habit of drifting. Love for truth, unless it assumes the proportion of definite pursuit of truth, may become similar to all other good intentions. You know, of course, what I do with good intentions. All habits, save only that of the love of definiteness of purpose, may lead to the habit of drifting. Q. Is love for one's relatives also dangerous? A. The love for anything or anyone, save only the love of definiteness of purpose, may become dangerous. Love is a state of mind which beclouds reason, saps willpower, and blinds one to facts and truth. Everyone who becomes self-determining and gains spiritual freedom to think his own thoughts must examine carefully every emotion that seems even remotely related to love. You may be surprised to know that love is one of my most effective baits. With it I lead into the habit of drifting those whom I could attract with nothing else. That is why I have placed it at the head of my list of bribes. Show me what any person loves most and I will have my cue as to how that person can be induced to drift until I bind him with hypnotic rhythm.
Love and fear, combined, give me the most effective weapons with which I induce people to drift. One is as helpful to me as the other. Both have the effect of causing people to neglect to develop definiteness in the use of their own minds. Give me control over a person's fears and tell me what he loves most, and you may as well mark that person down as my slave. Both love and fear are emotional forces of such stupendous potency that either may completely set aside the power of will and the power of reason. Without will and reason there is nothing left to support definiteness of purpose. Q. But, Your Majesty, life would not be worth living if people never felt the emotion of love. A. Ah, you are right as far as your reasoning goes, but you neglected to add that love should be under one's definite control at all times. Of course, love is a desirable state of mind, but it also is a palliative which may be used to limit or destroy reason and willpower, both of which rate above love in importance to human beings who want freedom and self-determination. Q. I understand from what you say that people who gain power must harden their emotions, master fear, and subdue love. Is that correct? A. People who gain and maintain power must become definite in all their thoughts and all their deeds. If that is what you call hard, then they must become hard. Q. Let us look into the sources of advantage of definiteness in the everyday affairs of life. Which is more apt to succeed, a weak plan applied with definiteness, or a sound strong plan indefinitely applied? A. Weak plans have a way of becoming strong if definitely applied. Q. You mean that any plan definitely put into continuous action in pursuit of a definite purpose may be successful even if it is not the best plan? A. Yes, I mean just that. Definiteness of purpose plus definiteness of plan by which the purpose is to be achieved generally succeeds, no matter how weak the plan may be. The major difference between a sound and an unsound plan is that the sound plan, if definitely applied, may be carried out more quickly than an unsound plan. Q. In other words, if one cannot be always right, one can and should be always definite. Is that what you are trying to get across to me? A. That is the idea. People who are definite in both their plans and their purposes never accept temporary defeat as being more than an urge to greater effort. You can see for yourself that this sort of policy is bound to win if it is followed with definiteness. Q. Can a person who moves with definiteness of both plan and purpose be always sure of success? A. No, the best of plans sometimes misfire, but the person who moves with definiteness recognizes the difference between temporary defeat and failure. When plans fail, he substitutes others, but he does not change his purpose. He perseveres. Eventually he finds a plan that succeeds. The person who moves with definiteness recognizes the difference between temporary defeat and failure. When plans fail, he substitutes others, but he does not change his purpose. He perseveres. Q. Will a plan based upon immoral or unjust ends succeed as quickly as one motivated by a keen sense of justice and morality? A. Through the operation of the law of compensation, everyone reaps that which he sows. Plans based on unjust or immoral motives may bring temporary success, but enduring success must take into consideration the fourth dimension, time. Time is the enemy of immorality and injustice. It is the friend of justice and morality. Failure to recognize this fact has been responsible for the crime wave among the youths of the world. The youthful, inexperienced mind is apt to mistake temporary success for permanency. The youth often makes the mistake of coveting the temporary gains of immoral, unjust plans, but neglects to look ahead and observe the penalties which follow as definitely as night follows day. Chapter 9. Education and Religion. Q. This is pretty deep stuff, Your Majesty. Let us get back to the discussion of lighter and more concrete subjects that are likely to interest the majority of people. I am interested in discussing the things that make people happy and miserable, rich and poor, sick and healthy. In brief, I am interested in everything that can be used by human beings to make life pay satisfactory dividends in return for the effort that one puts into the business of living. A. Very well, let us be definite. Q. You have my idea. Your Majesty has a tendency to stray off into abstract details which most people can neither understand nor use in the solution of their problems. Could that, by any chance, be a definite plan of yours to answer my questions with indefinite answers? If that is your plan, it is a slick trick, but it will not work. Go ahead now and tell me something more of the miseries and failures of human beings growing directly out of indefiniteness. A. Why not permit me to tell you more of the pleasures and successes of people who understand and apply the principle of definiteness? Q. I observe that sometimes people with definiteness of plan and purpose get what they ask from life only to find after they get it that they do not want it. What then? A. Generally one can get rid of whatever is not wanted by application of the same principle of definiteness with which the thing was acquired. A life that is lived with fullness of peace of mind, contentment, and happiness always divests itself of everything it does not want. Anyone who submits to annoyance by things he does not want is not definite. He is a drifter. A life that is lived with fullness of peace of mind, contentment, and happiness always divests itself of everything it does not want. How many of us are truly content? In a world where so many people are trying to keep up with the Joneses, could we not all learn something here? Is there something in your life that you need to divest yourself of? Make a commitment to catch yourself when you are feeling annoyed, and remember the devil's words. Anyone who submits to annoyance by things he does not want is not definite. He is a drifter. Q. What about married people who cease to want each other? Should they separate, or is it true that all marriages are made in heaven and the contracting parties are, therefore, forever bound by their bargain, even though it may prove to be a poor one for both? A. First, let me correct that old saying that all marriages are made in heaven. I know of some which were made on my side of the fence. Minds which do not harmonize should never be forced to remain together in marriage or any other relationship. Friction and all forms of discord between minds lead inevitably to the habit of drifting, and of course to indefiniteness. Q. Aren't people sometimes bound to others by a relationship of duty which renders it impractical for them to take from life what they want most? A. Duty is one of the most abused and misunderstood words in existence. The first duty of every human being is to himself. Every person owes himself the duty of finding how to live a full and happy life. Beyond this, if one has time and energy not needed in the fulfillment of his own desires, one may assume responsibility for helping others. The first duty of every human being is to himself. Every person owes himself the duty of finding how to live a full and happy life. Of course, though compelled to answer accurately, the devil still responds from the perspective of the devil. Is it possible that Mother Teresa or Gandhi had a very different opinion on this issue? They lived their lives in service of others. How do you feel? Do you put finding a full and happy life first in your life? Do you agree with those who would argue that to truly be of service to others you need to take care of yourself first? Is it then possible that Mother Teresa and Gandhi found their full and happy lives through service to others? Q. Isn't that a selfish attitude, and isn't selfishness one of the causes of failure to find happiness? A. I stand by my statement that there is no higher duty than that which one owes himself. Q. Doesn't a child owe something in the way of duty to its parents who gave it life and sustenance during its periods of helplessness? A. Not at all. It is just the other way around. Parents owe their children everything they can give them in the way of knowledge. Beyond that, parents often spoil instead of helping their offspring by a false sense of duty which prompts them to indulge their children instead of forcing them to seek and gain knowledge at first hand. Q. I see what you mean. Your theory is that too much help thrust upon the youth encourages him to drift and become indefinite in all things. You believe that necessity is a teacher of great sagacity, that defeat carries with it an equivalent virtue, that unearned gifts of every nature may become a curse instead of a blessing. Is that correct? Hill notes, unearned gifts of every nature may become a curse instead of a blessing. In our effort to give to our children, are we really cursing them? A very sobering thought, but also great advice for parents. A. You have stated my philosophy perfectly. My belief is not theory. It is fact. Q. Then you do not advocate prayer as a means of gaining desirable ends. A. On the contrary, I do advocate prayer, but not the sort of prayer that consists of empty, begging, meaningless words. The sort of prayer against which I am helpless is the prayer of definiteness of purpose. Q. I never thought of definiteness of purpose as being a prayer. How can it be? A. Definiteness is in effect the only sort of prayer upon which one can rely. It places one in the way of using hypnotic rhythm to attain definite ends, by the mere act of appropriating it from the great universal storehouse of infinite intelligence. The appropriation, in case you are interested, takes place through definiteness of purpose, persistently pursued. Q. Why do the majority of prayers fail? A. They don't. All prayers bring that for which one prays. Q. But you just said that definiteness of purpose is the only sort of prayer upon which one can rely. Now you say that all prayers bring results. What do you mean? A. There is nothing inconsistent about it. The majority of people who pray go to prayer only after everything else fails them. Naturally, they go with their minds filled with fear that the prayers will not be answered. Well, their fears are realized. A person who goes to prayer with definiteness of purpose and faith in the attainment of that purpose puts into motion the laws of nature which transmute one's dominating desires into their physical equivalent. That is all there is to prayer. One form of prayer is negative and brings only negative results. One form is positive and brings definite, positive results. Could anything be more simple? People who whine and beg God to assume responsibility for all their troubles and provide them with all the necessities and luxuries of life are too lazy to create what they want and translate it into existence through the power of their own minds. When you hear a person praying for something that he should procure through his own efforts, you may be sure you are listening to a drifter. Infinite intelligence favors only those who understand and adapt themselves to her laws. She makes no discrimination because of fine character or pleasing personality. These things help people negotiate their way through life more harmoniously with one another, but the source from which prayer is answered is not impressed by fine feathers. Nature's law is, know what you want, adapt yourself to my laws, and you shall have it. The preceding question and answer push the boundaries of Hill's critique of organized religion versus personal spirituality and responsibility. Q. Does that harmonize with the teachings of Christ? A. Perfectly. Also, it harmonizes with the teachings of all truly great philosophers. Q. Is your theory of definiteness in harmony with the philosophy of men of science? A. Definiteness is the major difference between a scientist and a drifter. Through the principle of definiteness of purpose and plan, the scientist forces nature to hand over her most profound secrets. It was through this principle that Edison uncovered the secret of the talking machine, the incandescent electric light, and scores of other benefits for mankind. Q. Then I understand that definiteness is the first requisite for success in all earthly undertakings. Is that right? A. Exactly. Anything which teaches people to examine facts and coordinate them into definite plans through accurate thinking is hard on my profession. If this thirst for definite knowledge now spreading over the world keeps up, my business will be shot to pieces within the next few centuries. I thrive on ignorance, superstition, intolerance, and fear, but I cannot stand up under definite knowledge properly organized into definite plans in the minds of people who think for themselves. Q. Why don't you take over omnipotence and manage the whole works in your own way? A. You might as well ask why the negative portion of the electron doesn't take over the positive portion and run the entire works. The answer is that both the positive and the negative charges of energy are necessary to the existence of the electron. One is balanced equally against the other, stalemated, as it were. So it is with what you call omnipotence and I. We represent the positive and the negative forces of the entire system of universes, and we are equally balanced one against the other. If this power of balance were shifted the slightest degree, the whole system of universes would become quickly reduced to a mass of inert matter. Now you know why I cannot take over the whole show and run it my way. Q. If what you say is true, you have exactly the same power as omnipotence. Is that true? That is correct. My opposition, you call it omnipotence, expresses itself through the forces which you call good, the positive forces of nature. I express myself through the forces you call bad, the negative forces. Both good and bad are coincidental with existence. One is as important as the other. Q. Then the doctrine of predestination is sound. People are born to success or failure, misery or happiness, to be good or bad, and they have nothing to do with this, nor can they modify their natures. Is that your claim? A. Emphatically not. Every human being has a wide range of choice in both his thoughts and his deeds. Every human being can use his brain for the reception and the expression of positive thoughts, or he can use it for the expression of negative thoughts. His choice in this important matter shapes his entire life. Q. From what you have said, I gather the idea that human beings have more freedom of expression than either you or your opposition. Is that correct? A. That is true. Omnipotence and I are bound by immutable laws of nature. We cannot express ourselves in any manner not conforming to these laws. Q. Then it is true that man has rights and privileges not available to either omnipotence or the devil. Is that the truth? A. Yes, that is true, but you might well have added that man has not yet fully awakened to the realization of this potential power. Man still regards himself as something resembling the worms in the dust, when in reality he has more power than all other living things combined. Q. Definiteness of purpose seems to be a panacea for all evils of man. A. Not that perhaps, but you may be sure no one ever will become self-determining without it. Q. Why aren't children taught definiteness of purpose in the public schools? A. For the reason that there is no definite plan or purpose behind any of the school curricula. Children are sent to school to make credits and to learn how to memorize, not to learn what they want of life. Says the devil. Children are sent to school to make credits and to learn how to memorize, not to learn what they want of life. Again, I find this chilling. Hill sounded this again in 1938, and yet the manuscript went unpublished, and today we are still teaching to the test in our schools. I am on a mission to promote financial education to teach young people about money, a true life skill, and yet many schools still reject it because it does not satisfy the test requirements upon which they are graded and receive funding. Is it not time to sound the alarms again? Q. What good is a school credit if one cannot convert it into the material and spiritual needs of life? A. I am only a devil, not an unwinder of riddles. Q. I deduce from all you say that neither the schools nor the churches prepare the youths of the world with a practical working knowledge of their own minds. Is anything of more importance to a human being than an understanding of the forces and circumstances which influence his own mind? A. The only thing of enduring value to any human being is a working knowledge of his own mind. The churches do not permit a person to inquire into the possibilities of his own mind, and the schools do not recognize that such a thing as a mind exists. Why is Napoleon Hill so down on churches and the prevailing organized religions of his day? I believe his criticism stems from an abiding love for the true spirit and meaning of faith and the underlying validity of all religious traditions despite what human beings do to weaken or corrupt them. What is the balance between accepting that which is revealed to your mind and heart, your soul, and the reality of life in a world so often infected with evil, as personified by Hill's devil? Q. Aren't you a little hard on the schools and the churches? A. No, I am merely describing them as they are, without bias or prejudice. Q. Aren't the schools and the churches your bitter enemies? A. Their leaders may think they are, but I am impressed only by facts. The truth is this, if you must know it. The churches are my most helpful allies and the schools run the churches a close second. Q. On what specific or general grounds do you make this claim? A. On the grounds that both the churches and the schools help me to convert people to the habit of drifting. Q. Do you realize that your charge is substantially a sweeping indictment of the two institutions of major importance which have been responsible for civilization, in its present form? A. Do I realize it? Man alive, I gloat over it. If the schools and churches had taught people how to think for themselves, where would I be, now? Q. This confession of yours will disillusion millions of people whose only hope for salvation is in their churches. Isn't that a cruel thing to do to them? Wouldn't most people be better off living in the bliss of ignorance than to know the truth about you? A. What do you mean by the term, salvation? From what are people being saved? The only form of enduring salvation that is worth a green fig to any human being is that which comes from recognition of the power of his own mind. Ignorance and fear are the only enemies from which men need salvation. Q. You seem to hold nothing sacred. A. You are wrong. I hold sacred the one thing which is my master, the one thing I fear. Q. What is that? A. The power of independent thought backed by definiteness of purpose. Q. Then you do not have many people to fear. A. Only 2 out of every 100 to be exact. I control all others. Q. Let's give the churches a rest and get back to the public schools. Your confession has shown clearly that you thrive and perpetuate yourself from one generation to another by the clever trick of taking over the minds of children before they have the chance to learn how to use their minds. I wish to know what is wrong with a public school system that permits the devil to control so many people. I wish to know, also, what can be done to the established system of teaching that will ensure all children the opportunity to learn, first, that they have mind.